You're walking across open ground. Maybe you're chasing something. Maybe you're just crossing a slope you've crossed 100 times before. And then your foot lands wrong. A loose rock rolls under your weight. Your leg twists and you hear it before you feel it. A sound like a dry branch snapping inside your own body. You go down. And when you try to stand, your leg simply doesn't answer. It bends in a place that legs are not supposed to bend. Now here's the thing. You're not in a hospital. You're not even near one, because hospitals won't exist for another 40,000 years. There is no ambulance. There is no cast. There is no bottle of painkillers in a bag somewhere. There is just you, the ground, a leg that no longer works, and a very simple, very brutal fact of nature pressing down on you. In the wild, a large animal that cannot walk is a large animal that is about to die, and yet you exist, which means somewhere back along your family line, stretching back tens of thousands of years, ancient humans broke their legs and did not die. They broke the single most catastrophic bone an animal can break, and they lived long enough to heal, to walk again, to have children. The question is how? Because the answer isn't really about bones at all. It's about one of the most quietly radical things our species ever did. Let's be honest about what a broken leg actually means for a wild animal, because we've completely lost touch with this. We live in a world of splints and crutches and sick days. For everything else alive on this planet, a broken leg is a death sentence, and usually a fast one. Think about a deer. A deer's entire survival strategy is one thing: run. The moment it can't run, every advantage it has evaporates. It can't flee predators. It can't keep up with the herd, so it gets left behind, isolated, which is exactly the condition predators hunt for. It can't travel to water. It can't move to new feeding grounds. Even if nothing eats it, it slowly starves in place. Most wild animals with a serious leg fracture are dead within days, sometimes within hours. And a human, on paper, is in an even worse position. We're slow. We can't climb away from danger quickly. We can't smell a predator coming the way other animals can. Take away our ability to walk, and we are, by every standard of the natural world, finished. A broken femur, the big bone in your thigh, is especially bad. It's the strongest bone in the human body. It takes enormous force to break it, the kind of force that comes with massive internal bleeding. A modern human with an untreated femur fracture can go into shock and die from blood loss alone before infection or starvation ever get a turn. So when you find a skeleton from 20, 30, 40,000 years ago, and that skeleton has a femur that was broken and then healed, you are looking at something that should be, by the logic of nature, impossible. And we find them. We find them again and again. That's the mystery. Healing a broken bone takes time. It takes, at an absolute minimum, 6 weeks for the bone to knit enough to bear weight, and months more to fully recover. 6 weeks of not walking. 6 weeks of not hunting, not gathering, not fleeing, not contributing anything. 6 weeks of being, in the cold accounting of survival, pure dead weight. And here's the wild part. Somebody carried that weight. There's a story that gets told in anthropology classes, often attributed to the famous anthropologist Margaret Mead. As the story goes, a student asked her what she considered the very first sign of civilization in an ancient culture. They expected her to say something like a tool or a clay pot, or maybe a grinding stone. Instead, she supposedly pointed to a healed femur, a thigh bone that had been broken and had grown back together. Her reasoning was simple, and it stops you cold. In the animal kingdom, she said, if you break your leg, you die. You can't run from danger, you can't get to the river for a drink, you can't hunt for food. You become meat for the creatures circling around you. No animal survives a broken leg long enough for the bone to heal. But a healed femur shows that someone stayed with the fallen person. Someone bound the wound. Someone carried them to safety. Someone stayed and tended them through recovery. Helping someone through difficulty, she said, is where civilization starts. Now, historians will tell you fairly that we can't actually confirm Mead ever said this. It might be a story that grew in the telling. But here's why it survives, why people keep repeating it for decades. Because the underlying fact is completely true. A healed serious fracture is, quite literally, fossil evidence of compassion. It is one of the only things in the archaeological record that doesn't just tell us what ancient humans did. It tells us what they felt. It tells us that somebody looked at a person who could no longer contribute, who needed food they couldn't gather and water they couldn't reach and protection they couldn't provide for themselves, and made a decision. The decision was, you're still one of us. We're not leaving you behind. And this isn't just a feel-good theory. We have specific bones. We have names. Let me tell you about a man who has been dead for around 45,000 years. We call him Shanidar I, because his remains were found in Shanidar Cave in what is now northern Iraq. He wasn't even our species in the strict sense. He was a Neanderthal, and his skeleton is one of the most extraordinary medical documents in human history. This man was a wreck in the most heartbreaking way. He had a massive injury to the left side of his face that probably blinded him in one eye. His right arm was withered and essentially useless, possibly amputated or damaged early in life, the bone worn down from years of not functioning. He had injuries to his legs that would have left him with a serious limp. He had hearing loss so severe from bony growths in his ear canals that he was likely close to deaf in a world where hearing a predator could mean life or death. And here's the impossible part. He lived like this for years, maybe decades. He was an old man by Neanderthal standards when he finally died. A one-armed, half-blind, half-deaf, limping man, surviving for years in Ice Age Iraq, surrounded by hyenas and big cats and brutal winters. That does not happen alone. It cannot happen alone. Every single day of those years, somebody made sure Shanidar I ate. Somebody made sure he was warm. Somebody made sure that when the group moved, he moved with them. His broken, healed, half-functioning body is the loudest possible proof that Neanderthals, the so-called brutish cavemen of cartoons, took care of their wounded for the long haul. And he's not alone. There's a young man we call Romito II, from a site in Italy around 10,000 years ago, who had a form of dwarfism that would have made him unable to do much of the heavy physical work his community depended on. He survived to adulthood anyway. There's the so-called Old Man of La Chapelle, another Neanderthal who had lost most of his teeth long before he died, meaning someone was very likely preparing softer food so he could eat it all. Over and over, the bones tell the same story. The fragile, the broken, the injured were not abandoned. They were kept. So let's get practical. Say you're the one who fell. What actually happens next? How do you go from a snapped femur to a healed one without a single piece of modern medicine? First, your body does the real work, and it's genuinely amazing. Bone is the only tissue in your body that heals not with a scar, but with brand new original material. Within hours of the break, your body forms a blood clot around the fracture. Over the following weeks, that clot is gradually replaced by a soft, rubbery tissue called a callus, and then that callus slowly hardens into real bone, stitching the two broken ends back together. Your skeleton is, in a very real sense, a self-repairing structure. Ancient humans didn't need to understand any of this. They just needed to give the body the one thing it actually requires: time and the right position. And that second part is where the care comes in. If a broken leg heals while the bone is crooked or twisted, the person ends up crippled for life with one leg shorter or bent. But many ancient healed fractures show good alignment, meaning the bone was set reasonably straight. That doesn't happen by accident. Somebody pulled that leg straight, an agonizing process for the patient, and then held it in place. We have evidence from various ancient and traditional cultures of splints, sticks, or bark bound tightly around the limb with cordage or strips of hide to keep it from moving. Keep the bone still, keep it straight, and the body does the rest. Then there's pain and infection, the two things that kill you while you wait. And here, ancient people were not helpless. The plant we now call comfrey was used for so many thousands of years to treat broken bones that its old folk name is literally knit bone. Modern research found that comfrey contains compounds that genuinely promote tissue and bone healing. They had no idea why it worked. They just knew across countless generations of trial and error that it did. For pain and fever, there was willow bark, which contains salicin, the natural ancestor of the active ingredient in aspirin. Ancient humans were, in their own way, running a pharmacy written not in books but in memory, passed mouth to ear generation after generation. But none of it, not the splint, not the comfrey, not the willow bark, means anything without the part that has no chemistry to it at all. Somebody has to bring you water every single day when you cannot walk to the river. Somebody has to give you a share of the food when you contributed nothing to finding it. Somebody has to keep the fire going next to you so you don't freeze. Somebody has to be willing when the whole group needs to move to follow the herds or escape the cold, to either carry you or slow down for you. That's not medicine. That's something else. That's a decision made over and over, day after day, for 6 weeks or more. Now, at this point, a very modern, very cynical voice in the back of your head might be saying, okay, but was this really kindness? Or were they just protecting a useful group member? And honestly, that's a fair question. Evolution is not famous for its sentimentality. But here's the thing, and it's the part I find genuinely beautiful. It turns out that for a species like us, kindness is the useful strategy. We are not strong. We are not fast. We don't have claws or fangs or armor. The single greatest survival technology our ancestors ever developed was each other. A human alone on the ancient savanna is a snack. A tight, coordinated group of humans who trust each other completely is the most dangerous thing on the continent. And you cannot build that kind of trust if the unspoken rule of your group is the moment you're injured, we leave you to die. Imagine living under that rule. You'd never take a risk. You'd never put your body on the line hunting a dangerous animal to feed everyone. You'd never fully commit. But if you know deep in your bones that if you go down, your people will carry you, then you'll do almost anything for that group. Compassion wasn't the opposite of survival. Compassion was the survival strategy. The groups that took care of their wounded built the kind of loyalty that made them unstoppable. The ones that abandoned their fallen, slowly, quietly, fell apart. We are quite literally the descendants of the ones who stayed. So how did ancient humans survive a broken leg? Not with technology, not with medicine as we'd recognize it. They survived it with each other. Somebody pulled the bone straight. Somebody bound it with bark and cord. Somebody chewed knitbone leaves into a poultice and pressed it to the swelling. Somebody carried water and shared food and tended the fire, and when the group moved on across a hostile land, somebody refused to leave the broken one behind. And I want you to sit with what that healed femur really is, because it's still here, locked in stone in museum drawers around the world. It is a message from a person who has been dead for tens of thousands of years. A message that says, I fell and I should have died and I didn't. Because someone stayed. We tend to think of ancient humans as savage, desperate, every man for himself. But the bones say the exact opposite. The bones say that almost as far back as we can see, before cities, before writing, before agriculture, before any of the things we usually call civilization, humans were already doing the most human thing there is, refusing to abandon the people they loved. We didn't survive because we were the strongest animal or the fastest or the fiercest. We survived because when one of us couldn't stand, the rest of us reached down. That instinct, the one that makes you stop for someone who has fallen, is older than language. It's older than fire-cooked food. It might be the oldest part of being human there is. And it's still in you. It's the reason it physically hurts to walk past someone in pain. That ache you feel, that pull to help. That's not weakness. That's 45,000 years of survival, whispering the same thing it whispered in that cave in Iraq. Don't leave them behind.